Alcohol is bad for your liver, right? Well, duh. What do we consume even more of than alcohol that is bad for our liver? Stay tuned to find out. Hi, I'm Dr. Kurisko. Today, I'm going to talk about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I would suspect that it is common knowledge that consuming an excess of alcohol damages the liver. But how many people are aware that the most common cause of liver disease is now the food that we eat? Depending on the source you read, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease now affects 38% of American adults and can lead to a form of hepatitis, liver cirrhosis, liver failure, and even death. Fatty liver is associated with high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and an increased risk of heart disease. Not good. In fact, the number one cause of death in people with fatty liver disease isn't liver failure, but heart disease. With 1 in 3 adults afflicted with fatty liver with such dire potential consequences, it seems to me that this should be front page news to raise awareness, but sadly it isn't. The name non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has recently been changed to metabolic associated fatty liver disease. At first I thought that this was just a pedantic shift in nomenclature, but I realize now that the name change is a really good idea. The new name highlights that the liver changes are not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a complete syndrome that may include central obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, alterations in blood lipids such as low HDL cholesterol and high triglycerides, along with an elevated CRP, which is a marker of systemic inflammation. It is a radiologist like myself that often raises the diagnosis. There are typical findings on ultrasound, CT, and MRI that are a giveaway, although liver biopsy is the gold standard for diagnosis. With tens of millions of people afflicted, clearly performing biopsies on them all is not practical, and there are definite risks in doing so. The role of doing a biopsy is reserved for more serious cases for prognostication and the exclusion of other problems such as autoimmune hepatitis, which, by the way, also likely has a dietary component to it, just like other autoimmune diseases. On ultrasound, the liver tissue appears more echogenic, meaning that it looks more white on the images. In severe cases, there is reduced acoustical penetration, meaning that the sound waves cannot penetrate deep into the liver due to the extra fat in the liver cells, such that the deeper portions cannot be visualized. On CT, the liver demonstrates reduced attenuation, meaning that it looks more gray than it should. On MRI, there is loss of signal on a post-phase gradient echo imaging, and so forth. Fatty liver disease is so common that I find, as a radiologist reading these scans, that my eye gets so used to seeing it that I often find myself forgetting to mention it in the reports. Subconsciously, because it is so common, the milder cases look normal. I feel that it's important that I mention it in my reports because it is a problem in and of itself and is also a harbinger of other serious issues. Sadly, it has become so common that we now even see it in children. Something needs to change, but sadly, it likely won't. I feel like a broken record in my report stating there is mild, moderate, or severe diffuse fatty infiltration of the liver. My fear is that the referring doctors are complacent about this. In my mind, even mild fatty liver should be addressed, and the doctor should have a discussion with the patients about how they need to clean up their diet. I suspect that a truly meaningful conversation rarely happens. In the iconic documentary, Supersize Me, filmmaker Morgan Spurlock ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. Not surprisingly, he gained weight, didn't feel well, and also his liver began to show signs of damage with rising liver enzymes.
I think I'm gonna have to go supersize.
It's hard for me to watch him go through this.
So it seems like you're starting to get addicted to it now.
You saw these numbers, right? These numbers are outrageous.
Unfortunately, you cause some major harm to your heart, your liver, your blood.
You're gonna die. You'll die.
I want more.
You gotta stop.
Elevated liver enzymes means that liver cells are dying and spilling their contents into the bloodstream. A very common clinical history provided to me for abdominal ultrasounds is elevated liver function tests. Eating just 2 fast food meals daily for just 2 weeks will cause abnormal elevated liver function tests. Often patients may be getting scanned for reasons other than elevated liver function tests, and they just happen to have a fatty liver because it is just so common. We often do ultrasounds for right upper quadrant pain. That's pain in the right upper side of your abdomen. The key thing is that we're looking for are gallstones, which are very common. People with gallstones often also have a fatty liver because they both have the same root cause, poor diet. Sometimes there are no gallstones, but the liver is fatty. The fatty liver alone can cause upper abdominal pain. As the tissue in the liver is infiltrated with fat, the liver gets larger. The capsule overlying the liver is very sensitive. Whenever I do a liver biopsy and don't get the surface of the liver numbed up enough beforehand, just touching the liver with the biopsy needle is enough to make people wince. An expanded liver from fatty infiltration leads to ongoing pain because of this stretching of the liver capsule. So what is it in the modern diet that leads to fatty liver disease? Both excess fat and sugar have been implicated. Fats from animal foods are most problematic. People with steatohepatitis, i.e. fatty liver with inflammation, consume more cholesterol, more animal fat, less dietary fiber, and fewer antioxidants. Recall that fiber only comes from plants and that significant amounts of antioxidants only come from plants as well. Plant-derived phytonutrients, such as anthocyanins, have been linked to less fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease may be linked to a lower quality of the intestinal microbiome. So-called bad bacteria may release inflammation-producing molecules contributing to the problem. Both dietary cholesterol consumption and higher levels of blood cholesterol are linked to fatty liver. In a study of 9,000 Americans followed for 13 years, not a single person with a non-HDL cholesterol less than 130 got fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease is the equivalent of foie gras, where ducks or geese have a tube shoved down their throats into their stomach and are force-fed a corn mash, which is something these birds normally don't eat. Their stomachs are filled with far more calories than they would normally consume. This feeding method is called gavage. The amount of food is huge. It's equivalent to feeding a 176-pound person 29 pounds of food in just a few seconds. This results in a huge fatty liver, up to 10 times the size of what a healthy bird would have. The liver also turns white, whereas normal liver tissue is a reddish brown.
The animals are pulled out of their cages. It's not uncommon to see the others huddled in the corners of the cage, terrified, as they look on to the other birds who are being force-fed. As you can see, a 20 to 30 centimetre metal tube is rammed down the throat of each duck. At this point, the animals are made to swallow large amounts of food. They will be made to eat up to 400 grams of feed each day, 2 times a day, usually for a 2-week period. This is like a person weighing 80 kilograms, which is about average for a male in the UK, being forced to swallow 13 kilograms of food in just a few seconds. Once killed, the diseased liver is cut out of each duck's body. This is what it all comes down to. These animals suffered cruelty during their short lives for this product. A liver that can weigh up to 10 times as much as that of a healthy animal, yet is labelled as a so-called delicacy.
Strangely, a diseased liver is considered a delicacy. This is the exact same condition as human fatty liver. Maybe it's just me, but I find it concerning that almost 40% of people are walking around with this condition. Here's the good news. Fatty liver disease seems to be treatable with dietary change. For example, teens with fatty liver disease put on a diet low in sugar improved within 8 weeks. Likewise, lower fat diets have been shown to improve fatty liver. A low-fat diet can drop liver fat approximately 20% in just 2 weeks, whereas a higher fat diet with the same number of calories can raise liver fat content by 35% in 2 weeks. On the low-fat plan, insulin levels dropped 15%, whereas on the low-carb diet, insulin levels went up 15%. Low-carb proponents talk about the need to keep carbs low and raise fat intake to keep insulin low, but the opposite is the truth. Their advice could not be more off base. From the book Mastering Diabetes by Cyrus Kambata and Robbie Barbero, a low-fat, plant-based, whole food lifestyle is the most effective way to gain insulin sensitivity using food as medicine. Even though this may seem counterintuitive at first, this form of nutrition is extremely powerful at reversing insulin resistance because carbohydrate-rich whole foods require large amounts of insulin if and only if the total amount of fat in the diet is also high. To prevent and treat fatty liver disease, patients should limit or eliminate fat-rich foods, especially saturated fat. In one study, people were overfed by 1,000 calories per day, either from saturated fat, unsaturated fat, or sugar. The saturated fat was the most harmful at increasing liver fat. Sugar was the next most harmful, and the unsaturated fats were the least harmful. Low-carb, high-fat diets are the worst for fatty liver disease, and low-fat plant-based diets are probably the best. People that eat the most legumes, beans, peas, lentils, and chickpeas, and that sort of thing, have the lowest risk. In both India and amongst Indian Americans, about 40% of these groups are vegetarian. The risk of fatty liver disease is much lower amongst the vegetarians. In Taiwan, the same phenomenon has been demonstrated. If a single daily serving of soy is replaced by meat or fish, the risk of fatty liver goes up by 12 to 13%. In the US, vegetarians are slimmer, have better blood sugar, lower cholesterol, and less than half the chance of having fatty liver disease. Although a dedicated clinical trial of plant-based diets for fatty liver has not yet been undertaken, the evidence thus far suggests that it would be the best to recommend. Don't forget that most people with fatty liver die from accelerated heart disease, and the only diet demonstrated to arrest and reverse heart disease is a low-fat, whole food plant-based diet. So it makes sense that it should be the diet that's recommended to people with fatty liver disease. Have you been diagnosed with fatty liver? If so, post a comment. What did your doctor advise for you to do? If you found this interesting, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.